Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So first off, I do want to apologize. This video is a couple of days later than I intended to make it, but I do have a full-time job and I had a couple of late evenings, so that led to this delay. Nonetheless, let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about the current fusion for Gnishak Verminlord. What's my plan to get him, and what tips do I have and recommend for you guys? So starting off with the fusion champion himself, legendary force attack-based champion on the A3. He has a 100% chance when booked on a 4-turn cooldown of placing 2 bombs that explode after 2 turns. Then he grants an extra turn, which is great because that takes him right into the A2 where he attacks all enemies again, another AoE, with a 100% chance on a 3-turn cooldown of placing decrease attack as well as decreasing the countdown of bombs, so effectively a 1-turn bomb, and increases the duration of all poisons, which matters for his passive, which we'll get into in a second. On the A1, 3 times at random, so good Giant Slayer candidate there. Each hit has a 50% chance when booked of placing a bomb debuff for 2 turns. It's also worth noting that every bomb that he places can deal double damage if the enemy's max HP is above 200k, which is generally always going to be the case for waves and some higher level waves and bosses. So the passive comes in, and every time a bomb debuff placed by this champion detonates or is removed, which does include cleansing, it places 2 poison debuffs, and that's per bomb, and those poisons are protected, meaning they cannot be cleansed or removed. He also has an attack aura in all battles by 30%. So overall, I give him an A+. Good base speed, decent base stats. I think this is not the full, he's not ascended here, so we can't see the, I think he has 1300 something attack. But I like the kit. He's another bomb option for Arena, so that's where I plan to use him personally in Arena. But we've also seen some pretty interesting stuff with one-shotting Bommel, which I'm going to try and make an ally attack team for that once I have him as well. But this fusion won't end before Doom Tower ends, so it'll have to be in 3 months' time. But I'm looking forward to trying him out there to see what he can do for the Bommel one-shot strategy. But yeah, overall, I think he's a pretty solid champion, and if you guys can go for him, I recommend doing so. And I guess we'll see, based on what I say today, if you feel that you can go for him. So what's it going to take to get this guy? As you can see here, there are 2 magic epics, 2 spirit epics, and 16 spirit rares. So all of those will need to be fully ascended, so up to level 40 for the rares and level 50 for the epics, which also means you will need potions. So I have this table here on the screen that shows you how many potions of each type, lesser, greater, superior, magic, and spirit. There's no force or void champions in this fusion. So you can pause the screen here and take a look at that table. But those are all the potions you're going to need for completing this fusion. Most notably, you make sure that you have 12 superior of each, magic and spirit, and arcane. So those are the totals you will need. Next, we can take a look at the calendar here, and we can start with the elephant in the room, which is the clear lack of a champion chase event. Now, I've heard a lot of differing opinions on this, and to me, I kind of see it as a good thing, because it's directly over the Christmas weekend, so you're probably going to be spending time with your families if you have a family to spend time with. And maybe you don't want to worry about 2 times void and making sure you pull enough voids or buying voids to get a fusion done. So I kind of see it as a good thing. And also it just means that this fusion only costs a handful of sacreds during the summon rush and no other shards. So I can understand that it's a bummer to not be able to use fragment champions or other such methods to help you get the rare or the epic from the champion chase. But in the grand scheme of things, you're not required to pull any void shards and you can enjoy your Christmas holiday. So make of that what you will. For the standard elements, we have our typical 4 dungeon spread of tournaments. We have 2 classic arena takedowns. We have 1 champion training tournament, 1 champion training event, 3 dungeon divers, 3 art enhance, and 1 summon rush. So a quick note here on the summon rush. It's already begun at the time of this recording, but the targeted champions are focused on sleep. So we have Chagger for the Void Legendary, we have Noct the Paralyzer, Gaius the Gleeful, which is a previous fragment champion actually, Prince Kaimar, and all of these have sleep. The Void Epic is Seer, one of the best wave nukers in the game. And then you have Allure, the Queen of Turn Meter Control. Cornelia, who can do some amazing solo stuff if you watch YST's content, but she's also really good in the arena as like a budget Kymar. And then Chancellor Yasmin has a chance to sleep, but she's kind of underwhelming. So those are your 10x champions. And of course, we also do have the controversy surrounding Aileel for 110 Void Shards, the guaranteed champion event. Now, where I stand on this is that from what I've seen from a lot of other content creators and what they've shown on the test server is that he has a great kit on paper, but he just doesn't hit as hard as he needs to make it work. And he's, especially with this A1 and the A3, he's extremely susceptible to the polymorph meta. And so maybe it's more of a plat arena type problem, and I'm sure he's probably going to be just fine as any other nuker for the rest of us. But based on that, he's just another nuker, so he's probably not worth 110 shards. As far as them increasing from 80 to 110, I don't really see it as that big of a deal. It's not great, of course, but for a champion of that caliber, to me, he's not even worth 80. So it doesn't really matter what the price is. I wouldn't have gone for him anyway, even though I could. I do have enough voids, but I go for the champions that I want, not just everything that they offer. So that's my opinion on that. Bringing the calendar back up here, I also wanted to talk about some of the pinch points that can occur during the fusion if you are going for it. The first of which being the overlap of the FireNet tournament and the champion training event. Both of these being coincident can cost a good amount of energy, so make sure that you're ready to be able to do both. The next one is right after the FireNet tournament, where Dungeon Divers 2 will have begun, and you have a day where you're doing essentially just champion training with nothing in between before the spider starts. So just be forewarned that you still have to finish the full divers with the remaining time of the spider tournament. And so you can be slightly behind the curve, but if you focus heavily on spider, you should be able to catch up and get that done. Just be aware. And the last pinch point is the overlap of the Dragon Tournament and the Champion Training Tournament. Same thing as the initial pinch point. It can be a large cost of energy over those 4 or 5 days, or I think, 4 days. So just be forewarned, make sure that you have some energy stocked up in some areas, whether it be from tournaments or events, or the energy refills you get every other day, or using gems. And any of those options, just make sure that you're allocating your energy appropriately for each of the different events and tournaments. So next, let's talk about each of the events and the tournaments and how you can get them done effectively with some tips and tricks. Starting at the top, we do have the Ice Golem tournament, which is pretty representative for how dungeon tournaments are going to be. I have already acquired the rare, but this was at 2250, which is a pretty standard value. Sometimes it's as low as 1800, and it could also be at 2050. It can vary, but I would always assume that it's going to be at 2250 to be safe. These always last for 3 days, so you have 3 days to do it. And my typical approach for these is taking it just day by day. So if I'm just going for the rare, that would be at 2250, I would just make sure that I'm getting 750 points per day. In this case, for this start of the fusion, it's just Ice Golem. There's no overlap, so I'm probably going to go for the Epic Tome and beyond. And I also want to finish the Dungeon Divers, which we'll talk about later. But generally, if I was for those pinch points, like I mentioned, sometimes I'll just stop at the rare and just get however many points I need for the day, and then move on to the other half of the event. Also going on right now, we do have the Classic Arena Takedown, 1 of 2. Now this top reward has always been at 390 points. This is really never an issue. We're still on the first day here, and I'm already at 300 points, and I still have quite a few arena fights to do. So if you're in gold 5, gold 4, this is really not hard. It's pretty easy in silver as well. It can be somewhat challenging if you're in bronze, but it's a good opportunity to try and push up into silver and to make this easier on yourself if you're more in the early game. But most of us in the end game here are sitting in gold, and this is pretty straightforward and par for the course. Next, we have Champion Training. So this one starts tomorrow, but it's not live yet. And typically, Champion Training events have 2 rares. They used to have an epic and a rare, but more recently, it's just been 2 rares. The first rare is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000 points. And the second rare has been creeping up, and it's usually now between 6,000 and 9,000 points, which sounds daunting, but it's not as bad as it seems, and we'll talk about some methods to help alleviate that potential pain point there. Now, also, champion training events do typically offer, especially 5-day long ones like the one that's going to start tomorrow, they do offer a legendary tome at the end at 14,750 points. So I always recommend, if you're free to play like myself and you have enough excess energy, to go for the legendary tome so you can actually use the legendary champions that you end up pulling. And again, I use the day-by-day approach there as well. So 14,750 over 5 days is roughly 3,000 points a day. So that's how much I would try to achieve. Similarly, for the champion training tournament that is later on in the fusion, that rare is typically around 6,000 to 7,000. I want to say 6,500. So similar issue where it can seem a little daunting for a 3 or 4 day champion training tournament. But again, we're going to talk about some methods to help alleviate that. So for starters, most of your champion training will be done in the campaign on stage 12-3 on Brutal, using whatever campaign farm you have and your food that you're leveling up, whether that be champions you're going to max out or food champions to feed to the champions you're going to max out. So after you've leveled things in the campaign, when you're going to rank them up, be sure to toss a few brews into them, 4 or 5, or run a couple more campaign runs just to get a couple more of the early levels, because it's a lot easier to get some of the earlier levels given the XP thresholds. Champion training points are allocated per level gained as well as per rank up, so you can get a lot of points for a little bit of silver or a little bit of energy. I recommend doing this for all of your 5-star chickens before you feed them, all of your 4-star chickens, and I don't personally do it, but sometimes it can be worth it to do it for your 3-star chickens as well. Also, a tactic I like to use is for all of the fusion rares, when I'm taking them to rank 4, I just use the rank 3 chickens that we get for free doing events and tournaments in Doom Tower, just so I don't have to make the food myself, and that will require 64 of these. And similarly, I always use the rank 4 chickens, 16 of those, to make all the epics 5-star, again, so I don't have to create the food myself. That just saves me a bit of energy. And it's also worth noting that you can take advantage of the champion training events and tournaments whilst the fusion is live to level up the fusion champions. So don't just run your food in campaign, run up some of the rares and some of the epics that you fuse in the campaign and champion train them, so you're kind of double dipping while you're leveling the champions needed for the fusion instead of preparing food. Moving on to Dungeon Divers, we have the one that is ending later today, and the rare is at the pretty standard value for 3-day divers at 2850. For these, I employ the same approach I talked about, the day by day, and so I roughly aim for about 1,000 points a day. As you can see, day 3 hasn't started because I define the days after the game resets. So I'm at the end effectively of day 2, where I'm roughly at 2,000 points. So just after reset, I need to make sure that I get another 850 points, and I will have that rare. The best way to do this is, of course, by farming the respective dungeon tournaments or the dungeons that are going on live with the tournaments. But if you do happen to finish a dungeon early or something, or you want to move on to something else, you can farm a different dungeon that's not part of the tournament just to get the points. And it's worth noting that stage 20 offers the most event points per energy spent. So stage 24 and 25 will give you better gear quality, but it will cost you more points, or you'll get less points per energy. So if you really want to focus on finishing a divers out on the last day, think about farming stage 20 instead, just to save some energy. But if you want to keep getting the same level of gear quality, then continue doing stage 24, 25. And if you're lower down than that, stage 16 is perfectly viable. It'll cost a little bit more energy, but it's still very possible to get divers done even with stage 16. For artifact enhancement, these are definitely the most costly part of any fusion or fragment event. The rare can range from 3,300 to 4,000, which we have here, and you just need to make sure that you have enough silver to get this done. I would say these typically run you between 15 and 20 mil, depending on your RNG on the artifacts, but that also depends on how you choose to do it. So of course, the number one way to do artifact enhancement is to level up gear. However, there are some tactics you can employ to make it a little less costly when the time comes. So one of the methods is leveling or pre-leveling your gear to level 15. So that way you prepay the silver, because you only get points for artifact enhancement for getting to levels 4, 8, 12, and 16. So doing these or paying the silver to get from 12 to 15 is irrelevant in between artifact enhancement events. So you can pre-level your gear to level 15, prepay the silver, and then just get the last level. We can do it live here. Just get the last level there so that you have that done. That's unfortunate. I really was hoping that was going to quad, but had a triple already, so I guess I was too greedy. But you can get that last chunk of points there for getting it to 16 and pay a little bit less silver overall because you've prepaid it. Another alternative is, of course, just taking your gear up to level 12 or taking your gear from 12 to 16. That's going to cost a bit more in the moment, but it's effectively the same points you'd get for leveling it from 15 to 16. Lastly, of course, you can also do what's called a gear cleanse, where you can kind of go through some of your accessories that you haven't cleaned up in a while, roll things up to level 8, you get a few points, and if you don't like it, that's okay. I guess I'll keep that. We'll see what it rolls at 12. But you can roll things to level 8 to level 12, see if you like it, and if you don't, you can sell it, you get some silver back. And so a gear cleanse is more of a cost-effective way. You're still going to lose silver overall, but it's a way to save silver as you're trying to level up gear, because you can get a lot of points just from leveling stuff to see what substats you get. And lastly, of course, we have the dreaded Summon Rush. Now, thankfully, this is pretty standard as far as the rare is concerned. 2150 has been the normal for a while now. It used to be down at 1750, so this used to be a 3 sacred plus 250 mystery type event, but now it's graduated to basically expect to pay 4 sacreds and then do the rest with mysteries. That's my plan, so I'll be pulling probably tomorrow after champion training starts. That way I can burn some of the mystery shards just by pulling food champions to feed. But my plan is to pull 4 sacreds and then 150 mysteries total. Now, you do have the option to pull 10 sacreds or some combination of sacreds and voids and mystery to get all the way down at the epic at 49.25, but that's not required. I'm not doing that. I don't think it's recommended, but if you really want to save time during the holidays, that is an option if you want to pull a few more sacreds and or some voids as well. And if you really care about some of the 10x champions, that might be a good thing to do, although 10x's are pretty tough as far as getting the legendary that you might want, but you can make that decision for yourself. I do want to also mention a couple of tips for overall energy and account management. Be sure to make use of all of the tournament and event rewards. If you don't collect them from the active or the live tournament or event, they do go to your inbox, which you can save them for up to 6 days. And you can use that energy within that time frame if you need to save it for something. So in this case, I'm saving all of these short-term energies for the upcoming champion training events starting tomorrow. You do also get every other day, full energy refills. So, and I have mine saved up all the way from 3 months ago. So I will use these as I need to get certain events done if I need a little bit of extra boost, if the daily energy is not enough. I do also make use of gems as energy. I employ what I call the floor, where I stay above 4,000 gems at all times, unless there's an emergency where I need to use a bunch of gems to make up for something I missed or to catch up to something I'm short on. But typically I just sit above 4,000 gems, and you can see I'm way above that, above 5,000. So I have a bunch of energy refills as well as copious amounts of excess gems that I could use for energy to help some of the pinch points, like I mentioned with the champion training events, or just in general to do extra things, farm a little extra ice golem, or do a few more dungeon runs if I'm short on a divers. So be sure you're allocating your energy appropriately and stocking up when you can, and using gems for energy when you can to make that easier. All right, so that's pretty much it for this fusion guide. As I said, I am going for this fusion champion. I do plan to use him in arena and potentially for Bommel, which could be really, really fun based off what I've seen. I have the calendar put up on the screen again in case you wanted to take a second look at it. I am skipping the Epic and the Summon Rush, which does mean that I will be doing all the events and tournaments to enough capacity to get all the rares, leveling them up appropriately, and fusing the Rat King in a couple weeks' time. So hopefully this video has helped you guys decide whether or not you can do this fusion as a free-to-play player. I am free to play and I can do it, so it's definitely possible. You just have to make sure that you're saving and allocating your resources properly. So best of luck to all of you going for the fusion. Good luck with your shard pulls, and I hope you get something awesome. If you are enjoying the content, be sure to like the video or subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.